What's up, everyone? Welcome to Among the Fence, my YouTube channel where I do music reviews. My name is Aaron. It is that time of the year, the end of it, where I am challenged with the very difficult task of picking my top 10 favorite albums of the year. And just like all my reviews, this is based purely just on my opinion. There's no authority in this. I'm not saying that this is like the greatest albums of the year and nothing else could ever beat them and your opinion doesn't matter. And with that said, please leave a comment below letting me know what your top 10 albums or even just your album of the year is down in the comments below. And this is something that was very hard, especially this year, because I feel like there was a lot of just absolutely amazing albums, a lot more than I feel like last year. I don't know. It always feels like the albums of whatever year I'm doing this in seem to be better than the year before. So yeah, it was very difficult. And this list is also based on more or less my enjoyment of these albums and not so much of this is the most technical, brutal, heaviest album in the whole freaking world. In fact, some of these albums that are more towards the top of the list as opposed to the bottom of the list have even lower rankings than some of those that are at the bottom of the list, because after a while listening to them, it's based more on just how much I enjoyed it, how much time I spent going back to these albums, just stuff like that, as opposed to an actual criteria that a lot of these albums have to meet in order to get certain rankings and stuff like that. When I do my actual review, lots of times I look for creativity within an album, I look for different vocal styles, I look for different stuff like that. And that all goes into the ranking, even if I didn't enjoy the album. In fact, there's been a lot of albums that I didn't really like that much, but they're fantastic and just everything that they do and the message they have and how they get it across. So it gets a really high rating, but I typically don't go and listen to that again. So that probably will not be found on the list. So I just wanted to clear that up, just in case if, my top 2 or 3 or whatever are not really your top 2 or 3, and that's okay, just because we have different opinions, we have different tastes in music, and it's also because, it's not the most technical thing is the most brutal, heaviest, most progressive thing is not going to be, it's not going to win you any points if I didn't enjoy it that much. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up, because a lot of times I get a lot of comments at the end of these where people are saying that I'm wrong, I guess, because my number 1 wasn't the most revolutionary thing in the whole world, which that's not what I'm looking for. Starting at the bottom of the list with my number 10 is the Callous Daoboys with their album Celebrity Therapist. I just mentioned that a lot of people get mad, and this is probably going to start it off this way. Their creativity in this album is just absolutely insane. The thought that went into just writing each one of these songs is beyond what my mind can comprehend, and there's so many flawless transitions in each song. There's so many different layers to everything to dissect. When I was doing this review, it took me a long time to figure out what I really wanted to talk about and what I didn't want to, because there was just so much stuff, and I could have made like a 30-minute review on this. And the music and vocals get the desired emotion across really well. They have this perfect blend of theatrics and hardcore in their music, so it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and the music is fantastic as well. I feel like this is God's gift to us after we just lost Every Time I Die, because that was one of my favorite bands, and Radical was a phenomenal album. It made it in the top 3 of my top 10 last year, and then it was pretty tragic how it all ended, and left a lot of us feeling empty inside. And I feel like the Callous Daoboys could easily fill that void. Number 9 is Chelsea Grin's album Suffer in Hell. A lot of people did not like this album, but this was actually the first Chelsea Grin album that I did like. The production was absolutely perfect for the atmosphere, and the story, which is the main focal point of the album, has a great progression to it. Musically, it's close to perfect, I would say. I just wish there was more standout moments for the riffs and the guitars to shine a little bit more, but when they did, it was pretty sick. The drum work was also fantastic as well, and I enjoyed that there was just a little bit of synth in there, but they didn't rely on it too much, so they still kind of held true to themselves, and they didn't, I don't know, I kind of fall into the habit of doing what a lot of other metalcore bands are doing, which is totally fine. But I like that they didn't, just fall into the mainstream side of things, which isn't them, and just leave that to the guys who are already doing it. Number 8 is Gavin Dance's album, Jackpot Juicer. I know that this album and the band have a lot of controversies based around them, not even just from this past year, but all throughout the band's life. And I was willing to look past that for the review, and I'm glad I did, because this is a fantastic album. And some of you guys might have issues with this. You might hate the band, whatever. This isn't a top 10 most controversial bands. I'm not going to go into it. This is a top 10 albums that I enjoyed the most throughout the year. And regardless of what happened, this one is definitely up there. It's a sonic roller coaster, and it's not afraid to go off the rails. Some of the songs admittedly didn't make me fall in love with them. And also admittedly, the album is pretty bloated. There's a lot of songs within it, but it was still very, very enjoyable. The guitar tone changes quite a bit, which really helps Will's guitar style not feel so redundant as I feel like it has in the past. And this is just, I don't know, after doing a review on their last album, Afterburner, which I didn't really care for that much at all, this is just a huge step up from it, and I enjoyed it so much. The vocals, everything was phenomenal. Number 7 is Norma Jean's Death Rattle, Sing For Me. This album felt a lot more mature and focused compared to the last album, All Hail, which felt kind of raw in terms of their songwriting, where Death Rattle was more raw in terms of production. At least that's how I felt to my ears. I connected really well with the lyrics on this album too, and the songs flowed so... It just flowed perfectly. From each song, each transition was so good, which wasn't really the same for me on All Hail. There's a lot of interludes, a lot of different stuff, a lot of songs that didn't, 1 minute little interlude things that didn't really work that well for me, where I found myself just wanting to skip them to go to the next song. Where Death Rattle, it just flowed in and out of each song. I hate saying this so much because it's such a cliche thing to say, but it really ebb and flows throughout every song, which is also kind of weird to say because it's a metalcore album. The riffs and drums throughout this were fantastic. They sounded so good. It reminded me of something that they would have made in the early 2010s, but it sounded still like a good progression from that, a good evolution from their old sound. But what had the most standout moments for me was probably the bass. All the bass lines in here were fantastic. Number 6 is Shadow of Intent's Elegy, and this one hurts me a lot because Shadow of Intent is just a top tier band, and whenever they release something in the past, especially Melancholy, it's always been number 1, no questions asked. So coming in at number 6 is it definitely hurts. The storytelling in this is close to perfect, as are the vocals from Ben Durr, who is phenomenal as always. And the instrumentation is great at setting the atmosphere, especially mixing it with the orchestration and the strings and the synth. My only issues with this album compared to Melancholy, the only reason why I compare it to a past album is just because you know what they're capable of, and all the songs felt kind of the same. They use the synth the same way. They use all the guitar riffs are kind of the same as well. They're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And there's not a whole lot of diversity within that really at all, unfortunately. It still works, still sounds really good. I know this kind of sounds negative, but this is a phenomenal album. Coming in at number 6, it's top tier. Number 5 is Spite's new album, dedicated to Flesh. This album is basically everything I wanted it to be. It's got tons of heavy riffs, lots of breakdowns. The bass and drums have some of the best rhythms that they've ever written. The vocal delivery and choices were brilliant. And bringing Josh over from Amir to play drums is just one of the best moves that they could have ever done. I've always been a huge fan of his, and just as soon as I heard he was going over to Spite, it was like a match made in heaven, and it put them back into my rotation again. I haven't been that much into Spite for a while, and then just this tiny little change up, having this different point of view of music, all that, it was fantastic. And I love the way they mix hardcore and deathcore together and how they switch between the two within songs. It's brilliant. Number 4 is Becoming the Archetype's new album, Children of the Great Extinction. This is one of the best returns I've seen since 2020, where it seems like almost every band was coming back, like Breakdown of Sanity, Attack, even I the Breather made a return, and they were just it wasn't good. But becoming the Archetype, they just did it. I mean, they've evolved so much, almost like they never really stopped playing together. I mean, I know over half the band is still in other bands and they're still making music, but as this band, it seems like they have just been playing basically for the past like 10 years, ever since they broke up. The music is fantastic. The riffs and the guitar tone is just so full of nostalgia. I mean, it's becoming the Archetype. This is what they sound like. And just hearing like just the first song that they released in the single, it was great. I enjoyed it so much. I was so afraid that one of my favorite bands was going to fall from grace with this return, just like many have in the past, especially the past like 2 or 3 years. I was afraid that they weren't going to be able to do it, but they made a return and they absolutely killed it. This one is going to piss a lot of people off. Number 3 is Lorna Shore's Pain Remains. I know. How dare I not put them at number 1 or even number 2, but number 3. But again, this is based just purely off of my enjoyment. I'm not saying that they're not incredible musicians, and this is probably the most technical and insane album on this list for sure. It's the most out. It's incredible. I'm not saying that whatsoever. It's just my enjoyment. I'm a sucker for concept albums, so I really did enjoy that aspect of the album. And every song is like a piece of the puzzle for the story that they're telling, and you can feel the anger and hope and the instrumentation throughout each song. And Will Ramos is absolutely incredible. A lot of people say that he's overrated, but what really just wins him over for me is not just all the different sounds and stuff he can make and how low he can go, or whatever. It's when he does it. It's his choices that he makes, which really sets him apart from the rest for me. There's different moments of emotion that he wants to get across where he will change his voice that's very much appropriate to it, or even just the lyrics. The lyrics are portraying something different within the story, a different narrative, where again, he'll change it and it works so well. And to me, that's where he stands out more. And I feel like that's what a lot of people miss about him. They just hear him growling and squealing and stuff, and they're like, I don't get it, he's not that good. But if you actually like read the lyrics and you get the emotion that they're trying to get across, it's super impactful. And hearing him on a full-length LP instead of just their EP really showed that to me, because that's it's a very long album, so I feel like that really tested him and it proved it, at least to me. The only drawback of this album that kept it from being a number 1, and another issue that a lot of people have, is the orchestration and the use of synth. Much like Shadow of Intent, I feel like they fall back on it just a little bit too much, and sometimes the guitar stuff, just a lot of the riffs and the trills and things like that, they could be overused as well, instead of venturing out and trying something a little bit different, which is what I'm kind of afraid that this band's going to start doing after a while. It's just going to be the same kind of synth and, fast guitar work and Will Ramos still squealing. But yeah, to me, it's a solid album. Number 3, I understand why people would put it number 1, but just for me, I enjoyed 2 albums just a little bit more. Number 2 is Counterparts, a eulogy for those still here. This is an absolute banger of an album, and the more I listen to it, the better it gets, and because of that, I just haven't stopped listening to it since it came out. And the emotion goes so much deeper than just the lyrics of this album. You can really feel it in the music and the guitar melodies and the riffs, and Brendan's vocals and his lyrics are just so good. I mean, his lyrics are so real to him, and you can feel it. You can feel that he's writing from a place vulnerability, as if you were reading like his journal, or I guess a diary, I guess you could say. And he doesn't just write songs to make money. He isn't trying to be super, revolutionary. He isn't trying to rewrite the wheel, I guess you could say. He's just opening up his heart, writing down what he has to say, and he just sings it to us, and it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, he wrote a song about his cat that almost died. A hardcore song about a cat that almost died, and it'll make you cry. So yeah, this one is easily number 2 and very close to be number 1. And before we get to the number 1 spot, I have some honorable mentions I have to talk about. This is stuff where I've enjoyed listening to them. I just couldn't really find where I would place them within this, just because I enjoyed it a lot, but I also have some issues with it, so it was hard for me to include it in the top 10. or even, like I said, know where I would put it. And first up is North Lane's Obsidian. This some of their best songwriting and some of their best lyrical content. My only issue with it was the distorted vocals, which I didn't really enjoy that much whatsoever. And the riffs throughout the album, they were just all right. And we also have Revocation's new album, Nether Heaven. Their mix of deathcore and thrash is just phenomenal. It's so good. The riffs are fun as hell. My only issues with this album were the guitar solos, which made every song feel so much longer than it needed to be. And when I was doing the review on this, it made it feel like it was more of a chore than anything else. I get to a guitar solo, I'm like, God, I just want this to end. It needs to be over. And then it would go back into the song, and I'm like, oh my God, it's still going. And when I was doing my review, I found myself doing that just after the second listen. So yeah, it made it a lot harder for me to really enjoy it. And then this is kind of a weird one, but Cult of Luna's album, The Long Road North, was the first time I ever listened to the band, and it is just it's so good. Honestly, this album could probably fit somewhere in my top 5, somewhere within there. It's super theatrical, almost like you're listening to like a soundtrack to a movie. The music teleports you to these different like sequences as the lyrics tell the story, and the vocals are some of the best stuff I've heard as well. It's just, yeah, the concept on this thing and the theatrics of it's perfect. And my album of the year goes to Taylor Swift's Midnights. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. I did review the album, but don't worry, it was never up for this. My album of the year goes to Fit for an Autopsy's Oh What the Future Holds. If you've been watching my videos for like about a year at least, you would probably know that this was coming. This is my favorite deathcore band. It's actually the band that got me into deathcore when I was trying to get into the genre. I couldn't do it. And then I listened to Fit for an Autopsy, and it won me over. And this album is insanely heavy, and just about every song is different. Everything stands out. The breakdowns are brutal, and they don't feel overused. The songwriting in this was really hard for me to predict, and the vocal variety is great. Even at times, the vocals will kind of sit behind the mix, so you could just hear the fantastic riffs and the drum work and the bass, and then the vocals come out and they're super explosive. And I've always felt like when I first discovered Fit for an Autopsy, I felt like they were kind of a one-trick pony. Sure, they made me fall in love with deathcore, but like I don't know, like this is just what they could do. This one sound off of Absolute Hope, Absolute Hell. It just like this is it, you know. But then they released Sea of Tragic Beasts, and it got my attention. I was like, all right, I see where you guys are going with this. And then they released Oh What the Future Holds, and this is just like the perfect progression from their sound. And a lot of people have an issue with this album because they say it uses too much mainstream sounds, but they don't overdo it to me. And not only that, but it's a little bit mainstream stuff, but just enough to get people who are listening to mainstream venture out and listen to other bands that aren't really mainstream. I mean, I wouldn't consider Fit for an Autopsy to be nearly as big as like Thy Art Is Murder or even Lorna Shore now. I mean, Lorna Shore is so much bigger than Fit for an Autopsy, and I feel like neither one of those bands are really mainstream whatsoever. And sure, they might use some different hooks and stuff like that it just reaches out and grabs somebody who doesn't have friends to show them other bands or anything like that. You know, they hear something like, oh, that sounds cool. It sounds like something I heard on this song on the radio or something. But then, yeah, I don't know. This album is just perfect. I've listened to it so much. So much. Probably at least once a week. It is phenomenal. So yeah, there you go. That's my album of the year. And like I said before, this list is based purely off of opinion and my personal enjoyment. And with that said, I want to know what you guys enjoyed this year. Leave a comment below letting me know what your favorite album or favorite albums are throughout this year. And the whole reason I started this channel was so that I could discover some new music, because I don't have a lot of people in my life that, send me different stuff. Or most of my friends don't even know who Fit for an Autopsy is, or even listen to Dance Gavin Dance, if I'm going to be completely honest. So I wouldn't have discovered them if they weren't for you guys. I definitely wouldn't have taken time to listen to them if it wasn't for you guys. And also, with that being said, leave a comment below letting me know if you discovered some new music this year. Let me know what new band or album you listened to that just just blew you away. Because for me, it was Cult of Luna. The Callous Daoboys were phenomenal as well. And I just listened to so much new music, and it was great. So yeah, let me know what your favorite album is, and also just something that you enjoyed that you did not expect. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like. Leave a comment below letting me know what you want me to review next. There might not be a whole lot of stuff coming out throughout the rest of the year because there's not a whole lot of music dropping. So yeah, I don't know if I'll even have time to get around to too many more reviews until January. And as always, if you want to help support me and my channel, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell icon. Doing that stuff helps me out tremendously, and I appreciate you guys so much. This is my 3rd year of doing this on this channel, and it's been great. I can't get enough of it. Can't get enough of listening to music and talking to you guys about it. So yeah, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to just sit here and listen to me talk about music. And I hope you have a good rest of your day or night, whenever you happen to be watching this. And I will talk to you guys next time.
I was trying to make me lying down.